Tutu. Good evening. Thank you for coming here. Justice Zondo, very welcome. We're waiting to hear from you and start the debate again. As President Motlanthe, welcome. Welcome both as a speaker and also as chair of our board. Very welcome. Tessa, wonderful to have you here. Let civil society speak and shine. Thank you for being here. And then Fazila, very welcome. Fazila Mohammed will be the ceremonial maestro, to use another language. And we welcome. And if there's two words that go together, is ethics and parliament. And she combines both. Please guide us. And of course, thank you, Justine Jones, for your support. And you will hear you a little bit later. As you know, IFAA is committed to debate the burning issues that affect our citizens and also our guests in the country. It is there to raise every burning issue, to allow our democracy to deepen and being able to really be active in this society. IFAA also thanks the University of the Western Cape. And thank you, Professor Davids, for being here. You'll have the final word in the end. And it's a wonderful collaboration and a memorandum of understanding between IFAA and the University of the Western Cape. And together we form the heart and brain of policy work. I won't say, in order not to start a dispute, who is the heart and who is the brain in this, but we'll find out. So here, this is under the banner of our Decode project, Defend the Constitution. And we thought that this is a wonderful opportunity to start again the debate about our parliamentary future. I will say no more. Thank you all. Fazila, we're in your capable hands. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to reiterate the welcome that Professor Sitas has given to all of us. Thank you very much for attending. I think that this is a very important discussion. You know, we are 30 years into our democracy next year, and it's a very suitable time to have this conversation of how far Parliament has gone and what else needs to be done to take our country forward. I think that I'm not going to go into long talk. Mine is not to speak a lot, but really to give opportunity for all of us to listen to the very wise words of the panelists. I think that we have with us a panelist qualified more than any others, a very illustrious panel, to actually lead this discussion and debate on the role of Parliament and its impact on our constitutional democracy. We have two eminent speakers who actually need no introduction, but I am given the pleasure to introduce them. I'll start with, I made notes because such illustrious careers cannot be condensed in a half a page of information. So they will please forgive me if I left something important out, because they did very many important things. So Chief Justice Manyamazeli Zondo studied B.Juris at the University of Zululand. He has an LLB from University of Natal, an LLM cum laude at UNISA on labor. He has two other LLMs in commercial and patent law. As you can see, he has a very well-rounded legal experience. He played a critical role in the legal sector during the years of transformation. I think that, the beginning years were very hard and people did sterling work to set up the form of our democracy. He was part of the task team to draft the LRA. He was the chair of the governing body of the CCMA. He was judge in the Transvaal Provincial Division, judge president High Court, and he was a judge of the Constitutional Court, then Deputy Chief Justice, and as we all know, he played a sterling role in coordinator of the PWV region and returned to NUM in 1991. I think that if you just read it out, you won't understand the immense humility and modesty of President Motlanthe. These things don't give the depth of his involvement and the role he played in building a democratic South Africa. He was appointed SG ANC in 1997. President Motlanthe served as president in 2008 and deputy president from 2009 to 2014. As we know, all of us know, he has been a voice for ethical conduct in government, and he has been leading this struggle. Tessa Dooms has a Master of Arts. She's a director of the Rivonia Circle. Tessa Dooms is a sociologist, a development practitioner. She works in academia as a lecturer. She has 15 years experience as a development worker, trainer, and research with expertise in governance. She worked in a consultancy or development, led a policy think tank called Youth Lab. She was appointed to the National Planning Commission in 2015, and she's a trustee of the Kagiso Trust. I think that we are honored to have the next generation of leaders with us today to talk about the future. Because we can look at the past, but the people from the future and who have a vested interest in the future must be given platforms and opportunities to speak. So we're very glad that you're here, Tessa. And then we have Professor Gregory Davids from the University of Cape Town. I'm sorry, I don't have a detailed CV or bio for you, but welcome, you're most welcome. So without much further ado, we're going to President, the Honorable Kgalema Motlanthe, to please address us. And then once he's done, Judge Zondo will speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fazila Mohammed, Program Director. And let me also pay my respects to Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, the IFAA Acting Director, Emeritus Professor Ari Sitas, the Acting High Commissioner of Australia, Ms. Justine Jones, Ms. Tessa Dooms, representing civil society, academia, colleagues, as we say, all protocol observed. I would like to thank the Institute for African Alternatives for inviting me to participate in this dynamic colloquium at a time of heightened uncertainty for democracies around the world, including the Republic of South Africa. May I add that were he alive today, the late Advocate George Bizos would have celebrated his 96th birthday today. As one of the most effective human rights lawyers, he dedicated his practice to ensuring that the marginalized and voiceless have access to the rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights. As the voices of the people most affected by a need for policy reform places the Constitution of the Republic under its spotlight, we are pressed with an urgency to better understand many ways in which today's theme of discussion, democracy can only work if Parliament works, can be examined, and whether the Constitution meets the challenges of today and the future. Be it known that such a theme reveals a certain duality along the lines of the law of the land and the innermost workings of the leadership and public representatives. For leaders who represent the most vulnerable and voiceless in society, their loyalty or fidelity to their oath of office comes into question. To draw out a central theme of the colloquium, we understand that there is a need for parliamentary and electoral reform to ensure that constitutional democracy in our country functions optimally. Additionally, there is a need to contribute to the growth and stability of a parliament where members meet and perform the tasks written out in the Constitution. We are aware that elected public representatives are eternally indebted to those who would have secured a high place for them in the party list. Hence, the reluctance to hold leadership to account. As a result, an individual's political footing takes favor over the essential process of checks and balances required to make the constitutional system function ideally for the benefit of the people. This begs the question of whether an alternative system needs to be in place to protect the independence of public representatives and reinforce today's theme that democracy can only work if parliament works. For if we want democracy to work, then the duties of public representatives to the Constitution of the Republic are to be carried out within a structure of direct accountability. To unpack these overlapping themes, allow me to propose that we deal with the topic from the vantage point where the system of democracy provides a framework to further explore the state at a conceptual level, and then deep dive into the disparities between cooperative governance and the role of elected public representatives. Across the world, democracy's claim of having the sole mandate on the principles of freedom, justice, and equality is being tested. As recent history would tell, yesterday's victims who take on the lessons of their tormentors to heart often outdo themselves as the new victims become the villains of tomorrow. As such, we are cautioned to understand that democracy is not a destination, but a process, and is never guaranteed simply by its arrival or utterances. It takes continuous vigilance to secure it. Additionally, to pursue constitutional democracy is to acknowledge that it will be a perpetual process like all other democracies. So if democracy is under constant construction, then the Bill of Rights, which is a defining cornerstone of South Africa's democracy, is also in a continuous state of becoming. Chapter 2, Section 7.2 of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of the Republic outlines how the state must respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. But only a capable state may enable a government that respects fundamental freedoms. Chapter 13 of the National Development Plan describes how South Africa needs to build a state that is capable of playing a developmental and transformative role. That the public service needs to be immersed in the development agenda, but insulated from undue political interference. That staff at all levels must have the authority, experience, and support they need their jobs, and that this will require a more long-term approach to skills development. Additionally, the NDP illustrates how improving relations in national, provincial, and local government requires a proactive approach to resolving coordination problems. However, with the current situation, we must accept that to improve our national governance system and capacity, we should adapt to make our institutions in all respects more professionalized and procedure-based. The National Development Plan directs us to establish a capable state, but the late Professor Sten Sangweni, who was this as a conundrum because of the manner in which senior managers in the public service are interviewed and selected. He asserted that the whole process lacks transparency and rigor, and that in most cases, interviews are not enough to show selected candidate is fit for us. And that his arguments are clarified if one reads chapter 4, section 12, subsection 1A of the Public Service Act, as well as chapter 8, section 42, subsection 3A. He argued that the president should rather delegate the authority to make appointments to the Public Service Commission, and that this commission should not itself act as an interviewing panel. Instead, it should put together an ad hoc panel of experts and practitioners in the portfolio where the vacancy exists, who will then conduct the interviews, discuss among themselves, and make recommendations. Therefore, the process of selecting and appointing senior managers will be both transparent and rigorous. Senior managers who are rigorously and transparently interviewed and selected for employment should then be appointed on a permanent basis as opposed to the current short-term contracts. This way, the state will become stable, capable, and professional with institutional memory. In a democracy, it is a given that governments come and go, whereas the administration of the state ought to be permanent. When we declare that the Constitution of the Republic is the supreme law of the land, we confidently affirm and accept that any other rules, guidelines, laws, obligations, or conduct that are not in line with it can be challenged and struck down by the courts. This is possible because in a constitutional democracy where power is properly shared by the executive, the legislature, and judiciary, the courts are independent and subject only to the law and the Constitution of the Republic itself. This brings us to the doctrine of separation of powers. The Constitutional Court of South Africa offers an explanation of constitutional supremacy and separation of powers, and I quote, "A crucial function of a constitution and one of the classic features of democracies is the division of power among the three pillars of government. Constitutions protect democracy by separating state power into three arms. A, the legislature makes the laws and monitors the executive. B, the executive makes policy, proposes laws, and implements laws passed by the legislature. And C, the judiciary tries cases and administers justice. The judiciary is unique in that it is not elected, but it is independent. This means no one can interfere in the work of the Constitutional Court and the other courts of the land. In practice, this means each arm of the state keeps watch over the power of the others. The courts can judge the action of the legislature and the executive, but cannot pass laws. The legislature can make laws, but cannot hand down judgments or take executive action, close quote. However, the principle of judicial review in a constitutional democracy creates the impression that the judiciary has the last word whenever a dispute arises. We are thus presented with a further balancing act where challenges arise in ensuring that the executive does not wield authority without being contained by the other pillars of government. The report of the Presidential Review Commission on the Reform and Transformation of the Public Service in South Africa, chaired by Dr. Vincent T. Mapai, explains how, and I quote, "the contrast between pre-1994 realities in South Africa current international best practice could hardly be more stark. However, the new constitutional framework has put into place a new set of principles and institutions that necessitate a move away from the former and in the direction of the latter. In particular, this framework commits government as a whole family to the principle of decentralization through the establishment of three distinctive but interrelated spheres of government: national, provincial, and local governments. A key feature of this framework is the principle of cooperative governance. This requires that the three spheres of government coordinate their actions and legislation and exercise their powers in a manner which does not encroach on the geographic, functional, or institutional integrity of government in another sphere. To enable provinces and local governments to exercise the powers devolved to them and provide services, they are constitutionally entitled to an equitable share of nationally collected revenue. Currently, the division of revenue is as follows: 45% goes to national, 41% goes to provinces, and only 10% goes to local government. So, when returning to the question of whether an alternative system needs to be in place to protect the independence of public representatives with regards to today's theme, that democracy can only work if parliament works, we must also ask, what is it that jeopardizes the independence of parliamentarians? This calls for us to briefly look at the Electoral Act and the proposed Electoral Amendment Act. Because under the Electoral Act, it is parties and not individuals who contest elections. Therefore, Parliament is made up of people on party lists who are selected or elected on the basis of internal party processes. And we must recognize that political parties receive public funding to establish constituency offices in an endeavor as public representatives to remain in dynamic contact and accountable to the general public. However, that system is ineffectual. And now the Concord has directed Parliament to amend the Electoral Act to allow for independent candidates to contest at provincial and national level. As to how independent candidates will be accountable to the general public without a defined constituency is still work in progress. Regardless of whether candidates come through party lists or as independents, they are all required to still take an oath or make a solemn affirmation before the Chief Justice or a judge designated by the Chief Justice as follows, and I quote, "I, Vladimir Vitwa, swear or affirm that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other law of the Republic, and I solemnly promise to perform my functions as a member of the National Assembly or a permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces or member of the legislature of the province of Talakupa to the best of my ability. In the case of an oath, so help me God," close quote. The swearing ceremony mandates public representatives to faithfully execute their roles and duties in line with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. One of the most important features constitutional democracy is constitutional supremacy. The supreme status of the Constitution is set out in Section 2 of Chapter 1, Founding Provisions, entitled Supremacy of Constitution. It says, and I quote, "This Constitution is the supreme law of the Republic. Law or conduct inconsistent with it is invalid, and the obligations imposed by it must be fulfilled," close quote. This means that any other rule, guidelines, laws, or obligations that violate the Constitution, or any conduct that conflicts with it, are not in line with the supremacy of the Constitution and can be challenged and struck down by the courts. It is at this juncture that we can presume the overlapping loyalty and the questioning of fidelity on the part of public representatives. On the one hand, the MP swears to be faithful, obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And on the other hand, an MP, for instance, as a party member, declares that he or she or it will abide by the aims and objectives of the party as set out in the party's constitution. So, ladies and gentlemen, certain gaps are exposed and possible frictions for party members of parliament arise because some party constitutions are silent and not expressly aligned to the Constitution of the Republic in a manner which makes it clear that the oath pledging allegiance to the Constitution of the Republic trumps the Constitution of the party, no pun intended there, and that the Constitution of the Republic is supreme or preeminent over the party constitution, which begs the questions: how seriously do members of parliament their oath when they become parliamentarians in relation to what the constitution of their party tells them? How relevant are the party guidelines and mandates in relation to members of parliament's oath of office made under the Constitution of the Republic? It is my considered view that this lacuna gives rise to the ineffectiveness of parliament, the omission or silence on the part of party constitutions to express their relationship to the Constitution of the Republic. If we are to create a democratic culture, we are to display exemplary conduct and respond ethically in challenging environments during times of uncertainty, then we must abide by our oaths and remain loyal. The future of South Africa's constitutional democracy rests partly with our elected public representatives who should act in accordance with their oath to the Constitution of the Republic with honor, integrity, accountability, and dedication for public good. And as I conclude, I would like to draw attention to how official texts tend to use the words or concepts of government, state, and administration interchangeably. And yet we know that these carry different meanings. They admit to broad and narrow interpretation. Therefore, I would like to suggest that, just for clarity's sake, at the conceptual level, it is important to distinguish government from the state, because government serves as the face of the state, but only for a term at a time. The state is permanent, but governments come and go. The totality of such a state at this point in time is invariably referred to as the sixth administration, as well as the sixth parliament, respectively. The reason we want to draw a distinction is so that we are able to clarify the different roles, and that the interface between the political principles and the administrative wing is also clear and well managed to prevent any interference in the day-to-day work of accounting officers or senior managers. Whilst we expect public representatives to contribute to the fulfillment to rights, are not necessarily accessed by all members of society. There are large sections of society whose bargain of citizenship is deprivation, marginalization, and repression, as well as violence at the hands of antisocial elements and the state. Therefore, the efforts of active citizenry by all sections of society must also work together to make sure that the Constitution is not the dead letter of the law, and that democracy and rights are brought to fruition. One's own intervention as an active citizen within one's immediate environment and lived experience can make sure that another disadvantaged person is given access to these rights. And in so doing, make the Constitution a truly transformative document and reality for more people. At the end of the day, it takes all of us to act in solidarity or in concert with one another, or collaborate to make constitutional democracy to work, and that this is a continuous process, an abiding struggle. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, President Motlanthe. I think you've given us a lot to think about. I think that this is the nub of the debate about Parliament and its effectiveness. So I think I'm just going to say a few words on what you said, but obviously this is not a comprehensive summary. But I think going forward, from what I heard, is that we need to look at the role of members as members and their effectiveness in representing the people. So the question is, this duality of loyalties between that of the party and the loyalty and fidelity to the Constitution is in, there are contradictions in these, and these need to be looked at for an effective democracy. Of course, the electoral system is the subject of much debate at the moment in South Africa, rightly so. And then, of course, the question of the democratic culture in parliaments. I think the culture within a parliament where people feel, and I think over the years, I'm sure, even in the Commission on State Capture, the idea that people have stronger loyalty to their comrades than to the Constitution has been long kind of advocated over the years. And I think it's something we need to address in looking forward and how we address and change that culture. And of course, there are structural questions which the President has spoken of. And then, of course, the most important thing is the role of citizens in ensuring a vibrant democracy. Those are the things I think that we all need to look at. And I think those were very adequately spelled out and based on the law and based on the Constitution and the thinking in government around the National Planning Commission, etc. So thank you very much. I'm sure that I have missed out some important points because your input was very rich. So thank you very much, President Motlanthe. Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, I'll ask you to speak. I think that your contribution in the last few years has been immense, and we look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Program Director, thank you very much. Fasila Mohammed, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, Acting Director of IFAA, Emeritus Professor Citus, Professor Gregory Davids, UDWC, Justice Goldstone, whom I met before I came in here, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to have been invited to this conference and to be part of this dialogue. In his letter inviting me to deliver a keynote address at this conference, Emeritus Professor Citus informed me that the Institute for African Alternatives had embarked upon a new project, namely in defense of our constitutional democracy decode, Parliament as the cornerstone of public participation. He pointed out that the overriding objective of the new project was to mobilize support for parliamentary reform, specifically in response to the findings and recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry that I chaired. He also pointed out that shortly before he passed on, Professor Ben Turok had expressed a deep concern about Parliament's failure to hold the executive to account, specifically regarding irregular, unauthorized, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure of state funds, as repeatedly reported by the Auditor General. Professor Citus also informed me that the release of the State Capture Report galvanized and focused the activities, and that they are guided by the need to pursue the realization of its 16 recommendations concerning Parliament. He said the aim of this conference would be to report on reforms being implemented by Parliament by this time, and the work that would still need to be done in terms of the framework of the Commission. I will take the opportunity to applaud the Church for its decision to launch this new project. this year, called "In Defense of Constitutional Democracy, Parliament as the Cornerstone of Public Participation." I applaud the Institute for this decision because it seems to me that there could not have been a more appropriate time for a project such as this. Indeed, the Institute is one of a number of organizations that resolved either before the handover of the last parts of the report of the Commission or after, that the country and its people had invested too much in the Commission and its work for its report and the recommendations to be allowed to be ignored, and that they would make it their business to do something to make sure that its recommendations were implemented. I accept that that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody agrees with every recommendation that was made by the Commission. Indeed, I'm aware that there are divergent views on various recommendations. But I think what is very important is for me to acknowledge the positive manner in which the majority of people of this country embraced the work of the Commission and its recommendations, generally speaking. There are a number of organizations who wrote to me after I'd handed over the last report to the President, saying that they wanted to do something to make sure that the work of the Commission did not go to waste. Of course, the Institute has decided to focus on the 6th recommendation that made. I think it is quite appropriate for an organization of the size of this institute to decide its focus would be out of the many recommendations of the Commission. And it seems to me that focusing on the recommendations that relate to Parliament is quite critical. In this regard, I want to refer to Section 42, subsection 3 of our Constitution, which has this following to say about the National Assembly. And I quote, "The National Assembly is elected to represent the people and to ensure government by the people under the Constitution. It does this by choosing the President, by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues, by passing legislation, and by scrutinizing and overseeing executive action." That section is quite clear. The National Assembly is elected to represent the people and to ensure government by the people under the Constitution. I said this reflects the importance of Parliament, of the National Assembly. But it also relates to the point that the former president made in his speech. On the issue of the conflict of loyalty that some members of Parliament may feel from time to time and may have certainly felt during times when opposition parties called for public inquiries into allegations of state capture and corruption. And of members of Parliament rejected those calls. It is a very critical issue. And Section 42(3) of the Constitution, and that is the section which provides that before a member of the National Assembly may commence their duties or functions, they must swear or affirm faithfulness to the public and obedience to the Constitution in accordance with Schedule 2. That too is a point which the former president touched on. So the drafters of the Constitution thought that what was required of members of the National Assembly before they could start their functions was for them to swear or affirm faithfulness to the Republic, not to a political party, to the Republic. And as I said, Section 42(3) says the National Assembly represents the people. Of course, what I have just said is not to be understood to mean that the fact that members of Parliament get to Parliament via their political parties is irrelevant, because it is not. But that is why I believe the former president was saying this is an issue that needs to be addressed, particularly where the constitutions of some political parties might not acknowledge these provisions of the Constitution, and therefore create some conflict for some of the members when they have to make certain decisions as members of Parliament. As you are all aware, the Commission had extensive evidence relating to how Parliament dealt with calls for public inquiries, as well as motions of no confidence in the then president. Parliament is a very important institution in any constitutional democracy. Our parliament is very important. Members of parliament are very important. They make laws by which all of us are bound. But apart from that, they have a constitutional obligation to oversee executive action and to hold the executive to account. But you will all recall that long before the commission was appointed, the Constitutional Court had found in quite a few cases that Parliament had failed to fulfill its constitutional obligations to hold the executive to account. And the commission made findings to that effect in relation to the evidence that was laid before the commission. I referred earlier on to that part of the letter that Professor Saita sent to me, inviting me to this conference, to a statement he made that Professor Benturok, before he passed on, expressed serious concern about Parliament's failure to hold the executive to account, particularly in relation to irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, unauthorized expenditure. Some of you may recall that part of the evidence that was revealed in the commission was exactly that. And that year in, year out, the Auditor General would send his reports. It was a male then, it's a female now. His reports, which set out irregular, unauthorized expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and which set out challenges in various SOEs, as well as municipalities. And the purpose of sending the report to Parliament was so that Parliament could be informed of what was happening and take steps in accordance with its constitutional obligation to hold the executive to account, with a view to stopping the waste of taxpayers' money, and with a view to stopping wrongdoing in various entities to which the AG's report related. It may well be that Professor Turok may have seen what had happened at PRASA over a period of 5 years in terms of irregular expenditure, which was revealed in the report of the Commission. In around 2013, I think the irregular expenditure was about 100 million rand. But about 5 years later, it was more than 1 billion. if not 2-3 billion. And each year it was going up. And nobody was doing anything about it. Despite the fact that Parliament was supposed to do something about it and hold the executive to account. That was not just that. PRASA stayed for over 6 years without a permanent CEO. And one would have expected that the relevant portfolio committee would not have allowed that kind of situation to continue for so long. I'm not sure whether at the moment PRASA has a permanent CEO. I know that at the time of writing the report of the commission, there was a CEO who was appointed, but before we finished our report, I think he had been dismissed after serving only 1 year. So the question that arises is, why was Parliament not able to exercise its power, carry out its constitutional obligations in the public interest and stop some of these things and hold the executive to account? Part of the problem may have been that Parliament did not have the right capacity Another one might be that they didn't have enough researchers to enable them to ask the right questions to the executive and to the executive management and the boards of SOEs. But it seems to me that the biggest problem may have been this, that if I was a member of the majority party, I thought that holding the executive to account would make my colleagues see me as behaving like the opposition. So therefore, I would not want to be seen to be behaving like the opposition. Therefore, I won't carry out my constitutional obligation. How do we change that? I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that there are many men and women in Parliament who are men and women of integrity and who put this country and its people first as far as they are concerned. But the problem is, why did we have this situation? How do we help them? How do we help them to change this situation? Because through the state capture, the people of South Africa lost no less than 58 billion rand. Nobody wants that to ever happen again. And yet, unless we do things differently, we could end up with that situation. And we don't want that to happen. The money that was lost is more than enough, even if some has been recovered. The Commission made recommendations about Parliament being given enough money. After all, they are the ones who decide which department will get how much. They should be given enough money to be able to have enough researchers. But apart from that, it's important to point out that if you are going to be in a portfolio committee, for example, that deals with ESCOM, you are going to need quite some expertise if you are going to be able to ask the right questions and understand the intricacies of our energy crisis. Training becomes very important, but prior education on certain sectors becomes very important, because otherwise the officials from various SOEs can just pull wool over your face and you don't understand. You need to have knowledge and experience that relates to the particular sector in order to be able to carry out your constitutional obligation effectively. One of the concerns that the Commission had was that the executive or some members of the executive would not carry out recommendations or suggestions from portfolio committees as to how certain problems should be resolved. But they would not be coming up with their own remedial action. And Parliament seemed to just leave things at that. In other words, they would call a minister, a DG, and issues would be raised and suggestions would be made. But if the minister and the DG did nothing, after that, it would just carry on like that. Of course, one accepts that the DG and the minister, being the executive, they would not be bound by the suggestions and recommendations of Parliament. But at least one would think that they would be able to say, we have a problem with these suggestions, but here are our own suggestions. This is how we are going to resolve the problem. But to have a situation where suggestions are made, but they are ignored, and nothing happens while an SOE is deteriorating, doesn't seem to be the kind of thing that should be allowed. The Commission also recommended the establishment of a portfolio committee that would be responsible for the presidency. I understand that Parliament is still undergoing or has undertaken a study to see how in other countries the presidency or a prime minister is held to account by a portfolio committee. That recommendation came really as a result of the evidence that was placed before the Commission in terms of what happened during the period 2011 to 2017. What must be made clear is that as a people, we all want to do what we can to make this country a better country. We don't want, again, the people of South Africa to lose another 58 billion rand. We want to learn from the mistakes that we may have made or mistakes that some of us may have made in the past, and want to say, how do we prevent a repetition of this? you will all recall that one of the recommendations that the commission made was for a permanent anti-state capture and corruption commission. I'm aware that there have been diverse views on it, and that's healthy. That's our democracy. That recommendation arose from a sense of despair to say, Parliament had the opportunity and the power to stop state capture. Because if it had allowed the motions for the establishment of public inquiries, parliamentary public inquiries, in all probability, state capture would have been stopped because of what would have been revealed. But the fact of the matter is that the majority party took the position that it was entitled to instruct its members not to vote with the opposition or not to support motions from the opposition parties on those matters, including the motions of no confidence in the president. And talking about that, I seem to recall that Ben Turok was one of the members of parliament who at some stage abstained, or it was reported that he abstained from voting. So the commission was faced with this. Part of what it was supposed to do is to say, if there was state capture, if you establish who were involved in state capture, if you establish what brought about state capture, you need to come up with measures, recommend measures that will make sure that it doesn't happen again. And the question was, Parliament and the majority party said, we believe we are entitled to instruct our members not to vote in support of a motion of no confidence in the president of the country is our president. We think that that's not good for the country. And I don't think that the current majority party is the only party that would take that position if I think there are others who would take that position if they became governing parties as well. So the question that the commission was faced with, how do we make sure that Parliament will be able to prevent state capture in the future if the way it dealt with the previous motion of no confidence is likely to be the same? Because it means they won't be able. And we were quite aware that there are already a number of institutions that fight corruption in the country. Indeed, for a long time, I didn't want to entertain this recommendation. But in the end, when it was quite clear that Parliament would probably not change because whatever majority party, there may be some which would not go along with that, but some would go along with the position that we won't allow our members to vote in support of a motion of no confidence in our president together with the opposition. Then the idea was, at least if there is a permanent commission that would keep an eye and make sure that whatever Parliament might try to sweep under the carpet in terms of allegations of corruption and state capture, it can then investigate and bring up in the open. That would make sure that the people become aware of any serious corruption involving a president or ministers or a government, and hopefully a strong public opinion would force Parliament to do the right thing. So I think that Parliament has a very important role to play in bringing down levels of corruption in our country, in making sure that in the future we never have a repeat of state capture. I think it has the power, and it's a question of whether it will be prepared to use that power. And I think that it's our duty to do what we can to help and work with it to try and see what solutions can be found. And I think that the role of citizens, NGOs, civic organizations is critical in that regard. Last week, the president was speaking at the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council Summit, and he said, the commission that I chaired was not his commission. It was the commission of the people of South Africa, because they are the ones who had stood up and demanded it. And I think many organizations and many people in South Africa, including this institute, have stood up and said, we will not allow this huge investment of the people of South Africa to go to waste. We will do what you can to make sure that its recommendations are implemented. And I think that all of us who want to make sure that this country is a better country, who want to make sure that the levels of corruption are brought down drastically, we need to find a role for ourselves in order to make sure that we contribute. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with all the recommendations. It just means that we identify those that we think can play a role in making sure that the levels of corruption are brought down and that state capture never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. I think that everybody was listening very avidly to your input. And I think you raised the critical question about what needs to be done to ensure that Parliament has its role. We know that there is, it's entrenched in the parliamentary culture that members of the executive disregard, and it's part of a kind of culture where members of the executive do not necessarily take Parliament seriously. And the point that you made about Parliament using its own power to ensure that it becomes the change, I think is quite critical. I think also you raised a very fundamental point about the public interest and the role of civil society to make sure that public interest is always well served. And how then can we look at building within the ethical framework of members of Parliament a commitment to public interest? So those are some of the things I suppose will come from the floor. I think that this question about, and I agree with you, I worked in Parliament for 20 years and for some of the difficult years, and I can attest that there are very many members who have integrity, but also they developed a culture of fear and people. I worked for Professor Churok when he decided not to vote for that. He served the ethics committee, which I worked at, and it was a very difficult decision for him. So I think that, going forward, we shouldn't assume that everybody in Parliament is corrupt. We must find a way of improving the institution. And we need to look at ways forward. I think that this question that bedevils our body politic, the question of loyalty and party loyalty versus what the public interest is something that will also have to be defined over time, because the public interest also changes over time. So I think that we need to make sure that those, and as you correctly says, Parliament's not only there to look at the individual amounts, but look at the systemic problems related to malfeasance. And that role is critical, instead of saying this person, because if you look at the way the Public Accounts Committee works, they'll say this department has mismanaged, there's been, and it's always so opaque, you know, there's been unauthorized. What does unauthorized mean to the public? What has been fraudulent, etc. So I think that Parliament needs to develop a systemic view of expenditure, but that's not for me to say. I'm sure there'll be lots of other questions, but I think we look forward to the discussion. But before that, Tessa, some new ideas and a new vision.
Well, that wasn't in my brief. Would have been nice if somebody told me. Good evening, everyone. So I wanted to start with a straw poll. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I find that those polls are exceptionally useful. So by show of hands, how many of you could name 10 parliamentarians today who are not ministers or deputy ministers without Googling? Are you sure? You look unsure. I ask that because, as both speakers have already said, it's the people's parliament. We, the people, own the House, and the people who occupy the seats occupy those seats at our behest. Yet we don't know who they are. That should be an anomaly in a democracy. It should be strange in a democracy that we don't know who represents us. Now, another show of hands. How many people in 2019 read a full political party manifesto? Don't fib, guys. Not a poster, not a pamphlet, a full manifesto. So glad it's the young people that are saying, and Professor Taylor. Because you might say, well, we have a system where we choose parties, but we haven't even done that work. So we, as the voters, have elected parties and people we don't know. A fundamental reason why our parliament is not working is because we allow it to fail. We, the people, have allowed our parliament to descend into a vacuous place where people we don't know need to do things we don't care about. So what do we do about that? A young man in Lazi last year said something that really stuck with me. And if you've heard me speak in the last year, you've heard me speak about it. He said, the reason why young people are not voting in South Africa is because we get the vote and they get the democracy. Democracy is supposed to be something that allows and enables the people to govern. Yet what it has done in our context is it's allowed the government to govern. And by that, I do mean the executive, because parliament just doesn't do anything. And it allows the government as the executive to do whatever it wants, right? And so the role of a parliament needs to be clarified, but I don't think we need new ideas to clarify the role of a parliament. I think we know. I think we need new ideas about how we as the people enforce that those people who we have hired to sit in those chairs on our behalf do their work. And until we as the citizens get involved in that, parliament will continue to fail. So I am not a defender of democracy, and that's a very difficult thing to say on the stage with a former president and a chief justice. But not because I don't believe in democracy, but because I believe that if we're going to, again, make our country work and even worldwide, democracy is in crisis. And the forms of it that it's taken on now, the institutional forms it has right now, may not be delivering in all instances in the ways that they should. And that means we have a responsibility to not defend democracy as it is, but innovate it to make it what it needs to be for our purposes, which means nothing is sacrosanct. If the Constitution can be amended 17 times, the way Parliament works can be amended. We have not thought about that because we think it's not our responsibility. But there never been in history, in a time, that turkeys have voted for Christmas. Parliamentarians are not going to fix Parliament. The way it works right now works exactly for their benefit. So again, we the people need to fix Parliament. How do we do that? The first thing is for us to determine who parliamentarians represent. And I think that's been covered already in the inputs that we've heard. Unfortunately, our parliament has come to represent parties and probably more damagingly, party bosses. The fact that Kgalema Motlanthe, when he wasn't even an MP, could traipse along into parliament on big voting days and impeachment votes to go and tell the ANC caucus what to do is a problem. Lutuli House should not be telling MPs how to exercise their constitutional duty. It just shouldn't even be necessary to do that. Now, you might say to me, well, the party put them there. That is untrue. We put them there. We vote for parties, and parties have a responsibility to put people into those seats to represent the people. In fact, we are more responsible for the election of MPs than we are the president. Yet we fixate on presidents. We fixate on who the president is as if he's Superman. But the 400 people sitting in the seats that we actually had some say in them being there, we don't know. Party lists may be created in closed systems, but they are openly available to us before we vote for those parties. We don't do the work as citizens. Otherwise, we would have known that there are people who are on those lists who are facing criminal charges, who may be murderers. Literally, that's where we are right now. We would know that there are people who are accused of pedophilia who are getting onto lists. We have to do the work. The lists are made available. If they represent us, we must know who they are, and they must know who we are. Now, I was in Atlanta, Georgia a few months ago, and I was meeting with civil society organizations. I'm from civil society. Many of you doubt that now, but it's okay. And so I'm meeting with civil society organizations, and I'd lined up like 4 meetings on a trot, and one after the other, people started canceling on me. And I was told it's because there was an important bill or piece of legislation in the Georgia State Senate that was at a whip going to be passed, or at least voted on. And all of these civil society organization leaders went home. I was with one of them in the car. When she went home, whipped on a parliament appropriate or Senate appropriate outfit, and were rushing to Senate, to their parliamentary house. And I was like, what are you guys doing? They said, we're going to go and talk to our representatives to ask them how they're going to vote, and we're going to try and lobby them to vote the right way. I said, what? Literally 4 organizations canceled on me to go physically be present when a vote is happening so they can eyeball the people that they put into power and ask them, how are you going to vote? Now, I know that the US is not the final bastion of what a democracy should be. And I know that there are issues with constitutional or constituency-based democracy. But I want to live in a country where every citizen wants to rush to parliament's buildings to go and eyeball somebody and ask them, how are you going to vote on my behalf today? As opposed to Gwede. I don't have a problem. Good. Sorry, just the wrong. But we all need to have that kind of fervor because they represent us. And how we get to that, and I'll talk about that later, is neither here nor there. But when that constitutional oath is taken, they don't take it to the party, as the former president has said. They take it to the Constitution and to serve us. We hire them. They do not get hired by the party. They are now our employees, not the parties. The party doesn't even pay them. We pay them. So why does Parliament exist, and why is it important that we have a Parliament? James Madison, a US politician, says, the effect of a representative democracy is to refine and enlarge the public's views, passing them through the medium of the chosen body of citizens, not politicians, citizens, whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of the nation. So the first thing there is about the public's views. Parliament's job is to collect the public's views on an ongoing basis, no matter how fickle that public is. And the South African public is very fickle. But the work, that's why we have constituency days in Parliament that we pay for, and constituency officers. Their work is to be stomping every community in order to go and source the public's views. Now, when I found out they were constituency officers, I was actually today years old. And I think I'm a very informed citizen. I pay a lot of attention. But it's possible that the majority of people in this country do not know we have parliamentary officers because a parliamentarian has never come to source their views. That has to stop. We have to demand of parties to stop using constituency days for party work. Your constituency is not your party. In fact, parties demarcate the country into actual geographic constituencies, which means all of us have multiple MPs who are meant to come and engage with us on constituency days, whether we have a DA membership card or not, because I've ragged on the ANC enough. We must find those people and they must all come account to us, even if they must do it as a group assignment. But it's possible and it's necessary. The second thing is that they must discern and they must make decisions, what we've been calling voting with your conscience. We cannot just say to people, oh no, you have now outsourced your brain to your political party, and you now no longer have the ability to think. What really that leads to is what I experienced last year with the electoral reform bill, where the night before the most important vote of the year, which was about changing our entire electoral system, parliamentarians calling me, telling me they'd not read the piece of legislation yet. And that a video that Lukhona Mnguni had sent to them 3 days in a row because he's a troll was explaining to them what was in legislation they were about to vote on the next day. That's what happens when we allow people to outsource their thinking and their power to their political parties. I don't think it's healthy for democracy, but it certainly does not help Parliament function better. And so the work of Parliament for me has to be about accountability. We've heard about that a lot, so I won't say much more about it. Public participation, which I've already spoken about. But the third thing is about a legislative agenda. We forget that parliamentarians are legislators. They have a function to legislate. Policy is important, legislation is more important. Ask the Chief Justice. What has happened in the country, and this is the reason why we have a Chief Justice now who's having to explain and in multiple public forums, because Parliament's failure to act and work has put a burden on the judiciary that is political and unfair. I would love the Chief Justice to not have to answer political questions, but he can't, because all the politicians come to him, whether it's in commissions of inquiries or at the Supreme Court or the Constitutional Court, excuse. Our judges are having to play politics because the politicians are not doing their jobs. They should be giving laws to the judiciary, not asking the judiciary to write almost every law. This parliament particularly has been the laziest parliament we've had since this democracy started. Lazy. And I'm going to make a comparison to the apartheid government, and it's going to sound unfair. But between 1950 and 1960, the apartheid legislators created over 100 laws. They were busy. You want to know why we're struggling to undo apartheid? Because they worked at creating it. We are not working at undoing it or creating democracy because we have lazy parliamentarians and we accept it because they're not the president, so we don't care. Until we get a parliament that functions, our democracy suffers. And so there are a few things that I think we need to have as questions that I won't answer today. One is, how are we electing our parliamentarians? Should we continue with the PR system? There's 2 reports that have already told us we should have a mixed system. The Van Zyl-Slabbert report and the Motlanthe report in Parliament a few years ago. We deserve a mixed system that has some level of accountability from the public. The second is this question of the party line. The third, related to that, is the question of recall. We still suffer the fate that we've never seen a president finish a 2nd term in this country, and it had nothing to do with us. I know everybody thinks that Jacob Zuma was recalled because people marched in the streets. It took months and months and months and a few visits from ANC top officials. It was the ANC top officials that did it, not the marchers. Because the power of recall lies with the party, and we are impotent to recall our MPs. That's a problem. The reason why the UK had 3 prime ministers in 4 months was because MPs get scared when their constituents write to them and say, number one, you live down the road from me, so I know where to find you. And number two, you said you would vote differently on this thing, and you're allowing this person to get away with things. And number three, the Constitution allows me to recall you tomorrow morning, not in 4 years' time. The power of recall is a powerful tool that is underutilized, and we must rethink it. I think that we must think about what are the characteristics that make a parliamentarian fit for purpose. And here I'm going to run through a list without explanation. I think a parliamentarian that is fit for purpose is an activist, an advocate, connected to communities, works for the public, engages in a battle of ideas, can build coalitions, is persuasive, has the ability to hold people accountable, and has the capacity to learn. What I would like us to do in 2024 is to look for those people as the reason why we exchange our vote for anything. Yes, we must think about the issues we care about. And I'm a big advocate for 2024 being about what's on the ballot. The issues must matter. But the other question for 2024 is who is on the ballot? When you see that logo of a political party, what is the list behind that logo? What is the quality of that list? Whose interest does that list serve? As voters, that's our responsibility. We must demand to know who they are, and not just by the IEC's shallow criteria of legality, but deeper than that. What's going to be required is a change of political culture first. And that's why I'm talking about us as the voters. The parliamentarians are not going to change it by themselves. It's not in their interest, but it is in our interest, and we can do it. I want to end with a quote from Julius Nyerere. He says, "You cannot develop people. You must allow people to develop themselves." Right now, our parliament is in ashes, literally and figuratively. They cannot develop us. We are going to have to develop ourselves by taking charge of our parliament. That's the only way to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I think that you raised some very important questions. So the first is, what are the criteria for membership to the National Assembly? How as a country do we determine what are the characteristics of people who should be members? The second thing is, once again, the question of the power, the huge amount of power in the hands of party bosses and the party line. I think the question you raise, and it's a question maybe for some time in the future, but how can a parliament, or could a parliament exist without political parties? Because I think that that's another question. I don't know. Is the time for parties over? I'm not sure. People will say. And then, of course, the relevance of Parliament itself and how it's been functioning. I think that you may be mistaken with the activity of Parliament from post-94 to before 94. And I'm just saying that because I'm biased. I know that in the transition years, Parliament won the award in the first two parliaments for the most number of legislation passed anywhere in the world. But just to give you perspective, I think that Parliament is a difficult place to navigate, and absolutes are not going to cut the discussion. So I think that it's really critical. The points you raise, though, are very critical. The question of members, how do they represent the constituency? So, for example, with the party funding, the constituency funding in Parliament, it's actually quite unfettered. Parties are given money based on their proportion that they receive. Some parties opt for constituency offices, and other parties don't have constituency offices. They say they deal with their media, with their constituents remotely. And other parties have regional offices based on their size. So Parliament doesn't prescribe how that money is used, just that it's used, and they have to provide audited statements that it's used for constituency work. And people define it differently. Maybe there's a need for a conversation on how that money must be used and to what extent, what constitutes party or constituency offices and what's their role. Because normally in a constituency-based system, people come to the constituency and ask for their problems to be resolved, and they have clinics and they work out all kind of individual problems. But I think that maybe one of the areas for discussion could be how party funding is actually, constituency funding is utilized, and the funds have been going up. I think that the question of citizen participation and citizen involvement, as you raised, is critical. And I think you're right, that we as the people of South Africa need to put forward our agenda for what we want our society to look like. And I think that that is a critical point. And how can we energize the public to make sure that people come there and they talk? The problem with the public participation program on legislation is often the public comes there to discuss their pressing issues. They don't actually want to discuss, if you have a public hearing on the Amendment of Basic Education Act, which is happening now, many of the people who come to these hearings actually are interested. There are people and stakeholders who are interested in that, but very many of the ordinary public who come there actually come there to also raise the other issues. And I think we need to look at how these forums are convened, how matters are discussed, so that people believe there's relevance. And if you believe there's relevance, you will attend. And I think so the question of relevance is really important. And I agree with you, there needs to be, I don't know if anybody ever saw that video on the TED Talks by Pia Mencini. She says Parliament is a 17th century institution of based on 17th century technology, based on the printing press. And she's saying there's a new era now and you need to review it. It's quite an interesting video about parliaments. But yeah, so that's enough from me. I think we come now to the question. Let me just check the Yeah, it's a question time. I don't want to take anybody's time in questions. We have a very limited time for questions, 20 minutes. I'm going to ask everybody who wants to, we'll do 3 or 4 questions at a time. So we'll do 3 rounds. And I want people to be brief, please. So we don't want to take a lot of time in the explanation. If you can get to your questions, I think it will give a greater opportunity for people to ask. I have a mic here. Which I can, oh, there is somebody there on the side. I also have this mic, but I was given double mic. So I'll stand here, and if people can put up their hands, please, and I'll start from this side. 1. Anybody? 1, 2, this side. Okay, and anybody else? 3 is hand at the back of the head. On that side, yeah. 3. Anybody else? Okay, let's go with this first 3. If somebody can hand out the mic, 1, 2, 3.
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Bulelani. I'm from SABC. My question is directed to the Chief Justice. Chief Justice, I like this statement that has been made by Tessa, where she says that judges are playing politics because politicians are failing to do their jobs. My question is exactly coming to that. In the discussions or forums that you go around in, you go around lamenting how parliamentarians have failed to implement the recommendations of the Zondo Commission report. Do you not think, as the head of one arm of the state, the judiciary, you're going to be seen as meddling in the affairs of the other arm of the state, which is the legislature, parliament? That's the first question. The second question is around also the interview that you did on Monday, where you were able to comment on a matter that is before the courts relating to the former president, Jacob Zuma. Now, some quarters believe that those comments have actually overstepped the mark and are ill-advised. I would like to get your response on that. Thanks.
We'll take 3 questions and then you can respond. The second question.
My name is Ganyi Sokhadebe. I'm representing HWPL. My question is directed to His Excellency President Motlanthe. You spoke about collaborative governance, but in that collaborative governance, you were stating on the 3 arms of state. So now, one question is, how can those 3 arms of state being effective, following even into this question that has been raised to CJ? And secondly, understanding that, for example, you know, having access to ministers to engage on certain issues, it's like you're trying to meet a president, but you're trying to meet a minister. Our ministers, or in many departments, are very inaccessible because of number of red tapes. So now, what would be, in terms of looking into the role of the civil society in the same context of collaborative governance? Because there are a number of organizations that are contributing a number of issues that we are facing as a country in trying to address those issues. What can you advise into those civil societies, and in terms of like what can be more effective when we look into the collaborative governance, where even the civil society have more voice on what is happening into the country, questioning what's happening, but also even their work that they are doing on the ground to address many issues that we are facing in our country? Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Professor, and for everyone for their very useful. Thank you, everyone, for your very insightful comments. Thank you. I have 2 questions, one for former Deputy Pres and one for Tessa. Former Deputy Pres, you said earlier that democracy is more like a journey than a destination. If that's the case, then could you tell us some road to look out for on the road to democracy? Like, what are the milestones that we should say, like, road marker 1, you've gotten this far. Road marker 2, you've gotten this far. And Tessa, my second question is, if you were to tell everybody in this room to go and do one thing to go and change their political praxis, what would it be? Thank you.
the Chief Justice, and if he then just passes it to President Motlanthe and then to Tessa, then, okay, you've got it, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, let me say, I chaired the commission and did work that went on for 5 years. I made recommendations, I made findings. It's quite in order that when I'm invited to speak, because I was chairperson of that commission, in relation to matters relating to the commission, that I should do so. It's something very important for our country. And what is true is that in regard to matters that might fall outside of the commission, that might be something else. But certainly on matters that fall within the work of the commission, there can be no doubt that I can participate. I don't want to deal with the statement by Kazak because I haven't had access to the full statement. And I think that anybody who wants to ask me about such things can do so at another time. But in terms of what we are dealing with here, everything is legitimate and proper. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question around cooperative governance. You heard me well, because what I was explaining is that there was a commission chaired by Dr. Vincent Mapai, which looked at how these 3 tiers and the 3 arms of the state, whilst keeping into their lanes, staying in their lanes, should also work cooperatively. Because, you know, to simplify the matter, I alluded to the division of revenue and you know, the broad percentages, that 45% of national revenue goes to national, 41 goes to the provinces, and only 10 goes to local governments. And yet there is no space called national. National is an amalgam of local spaces. And so the division of revenue, which favors national and provincial levels, and basically starves local municipalities. So you have a situation where local municipalities can't even attract the right skills, because just to give you an example, if someone serves in a legislature as an MPL, that person is entitled to medical aid, for instance. But if that person goes to serve in a local municipality as a speaker, which is an important position, they forego all those benefits. So how are we going to, and of course, you know, the reports by the Auditor General indicates that the majority of these 257 municipalities are dysfunctional. So Do you throw good money to these kinds of dysfunctional municipalities? The answer is no. But how are we going to ensure that the requisite capacity it exists at local government level? So cooperative governance allows for that. At the moment, I think government has a model that they call the district model. But literally what that means is that you have managers from a national department who convene a meeting which includes provincial people and at the district level. And they discuss whatever they discuss, and they go back to their positions. So the district remains starved of resources, and the capacity doesn't flow to them. So this principle of cooperative governance means that we shouldn't really end up with these dysfunctional local governments, because if capacity and resources are there at national level and provincial level, they should also be funneled into propping up the local municipalities. So that's how I would explain the importance of this principle of cooperative governance. Now, the second question says the ministers are inaccessible, and that civil society needs to know how to interact with them, to access them first and foremost, and to interact with them. I think the important point is how can civil society identify the correct pressure points and channels, so that through, because it's not a favor, I mean, it's not a gift of a minister. As Tessa indicated, these are servants of people. And so the people themselves need to know the correct pressure points and how to exert that pressure, so that the ministers become responsive. Yeah, that's the advice I would give. Democracy is a journey and not a destination. What I really mean by this is that we have to understand that democracy was never a full package frozen in the deep freezer of history, that so once it is announced or it arrives, it is complete. So you have all these rights in the Constitution, and the majority of the citizens don't know about these rights. They don't know how to access them. So it's an ongoing struggle that must involve the broadest cross-section of society, that to ensure that these rights are enjoyed by every South African citizen. And that entails an ongoing struggle, because even if, you know, the rights are established, the Constitution says, you know, access to potable water is a human right. But we still have communities where they have no access to potable water. They draw water from stagnant pools and rivulets, you know, they share with their livestock. How do we ensure that that right to access potable water is enjoyed by all South African citizens? That's what I mean. So it's an ongoing, continuous struggle, because if you get to a point where you think, no, democracy is done and completed, then there will be reversals. The rights that one generation enjoyed may actually be withdrawn incrementally. So that is why, as they say, we need permanent vigilance. We must at all times give feedback to our leaders and hold them accountable all the time. That's what I meant. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if this is on. Right. Thanks for the question. So the easy answer is politics is too important to be left to politicians. And we must all just start to grapple with that. In the work that we do at the Rivonia Circle, something that we've learned through doing community-based engagements around democracy is that our citizenry is not inactive. It's just unactivated. To participate in democratic processes, to participate in community building, to participate in political conversations, people actually show up. They don't show up when they believe that you have a political motive that's around party politics, because they don't trust politicians. But that's because we've narrowly focused politics on party politics. And so we define politics as the power to act, because we want people to start thinking about, how do I use power in my everyday life with my community? And so the more complicated answer is what we're trying to call voter conversations and civic conversations. And I say conversations as opposed to education, because education is quite a passive thing. It can be quite, there's an expert that tells you. But I think we must start giving each other, especially the majority of people who are disadvantaged by this society, give each other the dignity and the trust that we know actually what it is that's going on in our communities, and we can do something about it. And conversation is an end, what some of my comrades and friends call the organize, mobilize, conscientize method. The conscientize is the conversation, but to get to good conversations, we're going to have to mobilize. We're going to have to organize ourselves. We're going to have to get into constant conversation with each other, where we share new ideas, fresh ideas, and we use our collective power more and more and more. I firmly believe now that we're just a demobilized society, not an inactive one. But if we start to organize the way political parties do, but just as voters and as communities more, I think we'll start to make headway.
Take another round, and then we'll see this time. I just want to have a look at the time. So there's 1, 2, 3. Oh my word. So, okay, 1. There was someone else here, 2, 3. And then there were a few hands there. There's a lot of hands there. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I can ask you to be brief, and then also if you can just say to whom the question is directed.
Questions online. I hope you've got time to take them as well.
Okay.
After this, thanks.
So this is a very responsive audience, which is great. If you can send me the questions, Moira. Yeah, I'm not sure where. Maybe we can take 2 online. And then can I start here? I'm sorry, yeah. Okay, if you first. With the white shirt? Or is it the white shirt? Oh, okay, you've got the mic position.
We heard something of the power or weakness of the majority. Is there not a solution to have a secret ballot? Can we not do that and then not find that we've got differences of opinion in each of the parties? People work on conscience, not on loyalty to a party. Do what your conscience says. Can we not have a secret ballot? That's the question.
Okay. with the white jersey, gray jersey here.
Thank you very much. I am Simpiwe Silwana. I would.
Sorry, to whom was the question directed? Just generally to the panel?
I think the question was, I think, to the president and to the deputy president, please.
The Chief Justice, you mean? Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think my first question again is to the Chief Justice with regards to the separation. I think it's very important to really clarify, because it's not just a matter of cases that will come before you that then brings this issue of bias. We also have the South African government litigating now against the Guptas and in their extradition case. So now if they bring up all these videos of the head of our judiciary being apparently biased, we will never be able to extradite them back to South Africa. And we all want them to come and face justice. Now, Comrade Tessa, it's very interesting when you did that poll and here, and you also spoke about the influence of Twitter. And it just shows how and a lot of people here did not read the manifesto, etc. And it shows just how we sometimes fall into our privileged elitist traps, where we don't necessarily believe that the masses of our people back home have actually read and made an informed decision in terms of who they vote for. Yes, we have an issue with regards to the quality of our membership and whether parties are the best to represent us, but we cannot take away the fact that citizens voted for those parties based on informed decisions, based on informed information on their manifestos, and in some regards on those parties' resolutions. And there are checks and balances and how they interact with those political parties. We saw with the Motlanthe report, apologies for just saying Motlanthe report, it speaks of a hybrid approach where independents also can run. But who do those independents report to? Because unlike the UK system, which we used in good reference, where those politicians report to their constituents, who do the South African ones report to? Because what we find now is that they join these umbrella parties, such as BOSA, One South Africa, etc. They conglomerate around these parties. So I just want to know, how are we going to hold them accountable? So there's I had a last question, but I'll keep it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'd like to give everybody an opportunity. Sorry, there's somebody here in front who wanted to speak, and then there were 4 people there around that corner. Okay.
Chief Justice, this is Christian from Netwerk 24. Chief Justice, my question would be are you now are you tevrede, which is satisfied? Are you satisfied with how Parliament is progressing with implementing the recommendations by the Zondo Commission? And you said they have decided now to focus on 16. Should they only focus on that recommendations? What about the rest of those recommendations? Thank you so much.
Do some answers now, and then I'll give the next slot, and then I think if somebody is giving me the questions online, we can deal with the questions online. So I'm going to give people in this corner an opportunity after the responses here. Okay. Chief Justice.
Hello. Yeah. Let me start with the earlier question. I've already had evidence involving the Guptas. I've made findings. I've made findings relating to Parliament. I've made findings against various people. It's all in the report. So I'm not saying anything new really. It's all in the report, and obviously I would never sit in a matter involving the Gutas or anybody that made findings against in the report when they deal with the report. So that is that I would not be involved. As far as the Parliament and what they are doing in terms of implementation, I'm aware of what the report they made public some time back to say what they were doing in regard to each. I think most of the recommendations, their answers were, we are already, there's no need for this, we already have that, or there's no need for this because we already have legislation. I think there may be very few that they indicated they were pursuing. The one about the portfolio committee in relation to the presidency. Another one, they said with regard, for example, to increasing their research capacity. I think they said they were already in the process of appointing more researchers, or they had already done so. And in terms of following up on matters of oversight in terms of the executive, where ministers, DGs were expected to address certain problems, they said they already had some mechanism to do that. So, but I think my recollection is that a lot of them, they said there was no need for that because there's legislation, or they were already doing something. I think that was basically their response. I do have some reservations, but that's the response they gave. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The question of secret ballot really is it just depends on the presiding officers. They have the authority and power to allow for members of the House to vote secretly, but conscience in terms of guiding how members vote on any matter is itself a function of discussions and debates. As a principled member of the House or a public representative, you would want to be persuaded by dint of facts and be in a position to do the right thing. But of course, as I indicated in my input earlier on, the difficulty with the current party list system is that the parties contest elections and not individuals. And then the list of each party is arrived at through internal processes. Now, correctly speaking, I mean, each party ought to field members that it has confidence in, that these members will do the right thing, and that the party itself would not at any given point adopt a posture where which goes against what is the right thing to do. because that's where the conflict arises. And that's when the party leadership then want to impose, you know, or give the line of march that this is how you're going to vote on this matter. But it correctly speaking, shouldn't be that way. Instead, the party leadership ought to hear from the members in the House as to, you know, how the facts and the discussions and debates influence them rather than the other way around, because otherwise it means, you know, you reduce your public representatives into how shall I put it? I'm trying to find the correct word. Into voting fodder, really. And that's not how it should be, because a party gains prestige if its members in the House or public representatives are seen to be upright and acting in the best interest of the people, because then the people benefit from that, and the party then gains from that. But if the party leaders decide on behalf of the public representatives, then the party basically will slowly slide into the morass where it is not trusted at all. So my short answer really is that conscience finds expression in how people understand the issues. That's what I would say, because it's not like there's a simple right or wrong question. If you're a public representative, you are there to influence and be influenced. And one of the important, you know, elements of leadership is accepting and understanding that there are leaders outside of yourselves. And so the views that might come even from the opposing benches may actually be correct views. And there's nothing wrong in appreciating, accepting that. Yeah. Thank you.
I want to actually add on to that, even though I'm not a president. Because Parliament's burnt down, City Hall means that parliamentarians actually have to now vote vocally. And when I saw that for the first time, I thought this is the most powerful moment I've seen in Parliament's history. Because I think if you're representing the public, you must be able to represent the public with your whole chest. If you're going to vote wrong loud. And then let's judge them on how it is that they vote. I really have no interest in secret ballots. None whatsoever. On the question is actually directed to me. Manifestos. So we weren't born in boardrooms, Chief. We were born in communities, and we're still in those communities, and we work in those communities. I've been in 81 communities in less than 18 months, talking about exactly these issues. And I can tell you people are making informed decisions, but they're not necessarily making them because they've read a 200-page manifesto. Manifestos are actually inaccessibly written by political parties, unless it's a one-pager letter that a political party actually wrote a one-pager letter once, which was fine. But I don't think parties are doing the work of actually canvassing their manifestos. I think they canvass slogans a lot. I think they canvass bullet points. I don't think parties are doing that work. I mean, I would challenge parties to actually translate their manifestos into different languages so that you actually can have real conversations about those manifestos. So I think people are informed, but what is informing our votes is extremely fluid. And I wouldn't say people don't, are not reading or not willing to, but I do think it's inaccessible in the ways that it comes forward. The other issue was independence. So that question should be asked of parties as well. So, and the answer, who do parties report to? Unfortunately, they're not reporting to society that voted for them, right? So you would know the ANC has 1 million odd members, but it had 10 million voters. It shouldn't only report to its million members, it should be reporting to its 10 million voters. And because it doesn't know who that is, it has to be all of us. Independence, though, if you think about the ward councillor system, in the city of Joburg, the ANC only has 4 PR councillors. The rest of their councillors are ward councillors, which means even though they're in parties, much like the UK, people can be in parties, but they're directly elected by that ward. Who they should be reporting to as well is that ward. And so independents need to show a constituency, and they need to do the work of building a constituency that they're willing to be accountable to if the system doesn't provide for that yet. In next year's election, the constituency that independents are going to have is a province. And so they're going to have to report to a province, but they're going to have to use their constituency days to do that work. And so I don't think it's particular to independents at all. Everybody needs to build constituencies that they actively lean into being accountable to.
Okay. Okay, there's a question from online, and then I'm just going to ask whoever then next speaks, ask questions to please do so quickly, because I think we're running out of time, and we are past time already. But I don't want to stop the discussion. So if your question is already being covered, please don't duplicate it. Moira, can you read the question?
From Andrew Feinstein. Is it possible for Parliament to undertake its oversight functions effectively with our pure PR electoral system? In the early years of democracy, SCOPA used to lead the way in demanding accountability from the executive. Then during our second democratic parliament, SCOPA was effectively neutered around the arms deal. ANC MPs who wanted accountability were removed from the committee and in some instances from parliament. A mixed electoral system would have made this much more difficult for the executive to do. The role of the NPA and the justice system in acting against transgressors is also an important dimension of the accountability cycle.
Thank you. Okay, can we just do a few of the others and then we can conclude? Okay, you can go with a black jersey.
Good evening. My name is Matthew George. What the Chief Justice discussed in his presentation regarding the necessity to prevent a recurrence of factors that facilitated state capture and our understanding of the role that the public protector plays in that effort, I would like to hear the Chief Justice's perspective on the newly appointed public protector's proposal to criminalize the non-implementation of the public protector's remedial action, which she contends would make her work more effective. Could you capture me? Okay, can you hear me now? Much better. Okay, so given what the Chief Justice discussed in his presentation regarding the necessity to prevent a recurrence of factors that facilitated state capture and our understanding of what the role of the public protector is in that effort, I would like to hear the CJ's perspective on the newly appointed public protector's proposal that the non-implementation of her remedial actions be criminalized, which she contends would make her work far more effective.
Hi, my name is Atoli Lemajwala. I'm from Rise Mzansi. While understanding that the conversation comes as a result of the recommendations in relation to Parliament, obviously amend the title to say democracy can only work if Parliament, provincial legislatures, and municipal council work. And then my question in relation to that also relates to, I think, what the President spoke extensively about and the recommendation that Tessa made. What guarantees do we have that if we have a mixed system, we'll have better representative when at the local level we have a mixed system that fails with ward councillors who also have a defined constituency and a much smaller constituency than MPs would have. So the question is what guarantees, and at the same time, do you, President, since you went on some of the recommendations, still continue with that recommendation is failing the system as well?
Yeah, okay. I think that based on the time constraints, we have to end, unfortunately. I think people may also want to go home because we're really running over time now. I'll give a short opportunity for people to respond, and then we can do the the final part of the program, the remarks from the sponsor and the closing remarks. Okay, if I can ask the panelists also to be short, please. These discussions are lengthy, and so there will be another opportunity, one hopes, to have another discussion.
Mine will be very short. I don't think that I'm in a position to comment on the public protector's proposal. I haven't seen the whole thing. I've just heard, I think, in the media, basically what you have said. But I don't think that I should say anything about it. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the hybrid system, PR and constituency based, the experience at local government, it's a mixed outcomes. I know of constituency or ward councillors in very poor communities where there's no access to potable water. Literally, I mean, there's nothing. There's still a bucket system even. And I know of a ward councillor who would go into each and every shack, feedback, and therefore is known by all the residents and keeps in dynamic contact with them. But those are exceptions to the rule. The general pattern is one where communities are hardly ever convened. If anything, the councillors, the PR or ward councillors, are satisfied if they meet as members of a political organization or political party. So the political party gets substituted for the community. So general community meetings are never held. That's a failure. And of course, raises the question as to whether a hybrid electoral system would improve on the accountability at provincial and national levels. Yeah, that's a work in progress, I suppose. Thank you.
My answer to that is two things. One is the power of recall will help. Communities and constituencies having the power of recall, I think, would help. But I think the bigger issue is about political culture change and the quality of our politicians. Better politicians is the only way you get better forms of accountability, unfortunately, and maybe fortunately. But I think there's a political culture shift that needs to happen in our psyche where we don't see the party as all-encompassing and we take back people's power. Politicians have to give that power back, in fact.
Thank you very much. I would have liked to make some concluding remarks, just to wrap up the discussion or ask for more final round of comments, but time doesn't allow. I think that can we call the sponsor, Justine Jones, Acting Deputy High Commissioner of Australia. Thank you very much for sponsoring this event, and I'll give you the opportunity to say some words.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Chief Justice Zondo, former President Motlanthe, esteemed members of the panel, it's such a privilege to be here tonight amongst some real giants of South African public life. Thank you so much. And I also wish we'd keep going. So thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. The Australian High Commission is a proud partner of IFAA, and we're really pleased to support the Decode project. The High Commission has supported almost 50 projects just in South Africa and many more over our 7 countries of accreditation just in the last 5 years across many sectors. So governance is one we like to focus on, but we've also supported projects in health, education, food security, gender equality, economic empowerment, and many more. Australia and South Africa's democratic and parliamentary systems are rooted in our specific historical and political contexts. There are many important differences between our systems for these reasons. But as constitutional democracies, we share a lot. We share robust democratic institutions, a commitment to human rights and inclusivity. Our parliaments are expressions of the diversity of our societies. Australia's current parliament includes representatives from First Nations, Asian, Middle Eastern, European, Pacific Islander, and African backgrounds, including a South African-born senator. We also share a free, independent, and vibrant media, or the fourth arm of government, and a robust civil society. And I think the fact that we're here in this room having these conversations tonight is testament to the strength of the civil society sector here in South Africa. So the Decode project is about defending constitutional democracy. At its heart, the project recognises that democratic institutions and processes require constant care and effort over time from these 4 arms of government, civil society and the public. And we've heard tonight from former President Motlanthe about the continuous process and abiding struggle that involves. We've heard quite powerfully from Tessa about the role of the public in keeping up that work. So the work of the Zondo Commission is an example of an accountability mechanism developed to defend these democratic ideals. And I wanted to share an example from the Australian context that I think is relevant. So Australia has a brand new institution in this space. The National Anti-Corruption Commission commenced operations on the 1st of July this year. If it was a baby, it could not yet crawl. Its role is to enhance integrity in the public sector by deterring, detecting, and preventing corrupt conduct involving Commonwealth public officials. It does this through education, monitoring, investigation, reporting, and referral. The establishment of this independent agency was subject to, I think I can call it, quite lively debate over many years as our parliamentarians grappled with how best to give effect to the public's desire for a national anti-corruption body. Australia already had some state, or I think the equivalent is provincial, bodies in place, some of which had taken the scalps of several premiers. I mean that politically, not literally. Our largest province, whose capital, Sydney, shares some of the beauty of this great harbour city of Cape Town. So anyone, that's any member of the public, can make a referral to the Anti-Corruption Commission for investigation. In its first 100 days of operation, the NAC received over 1,200 referrals and it's opened a number of investigations. The new commissioner of the body said he sensed a changing affairs of the nation, which might significantly change for the better the government. Combating corruption therefore continues to evolve, driven by committed stakeholders in all sectors of society who understand our shared interest in proper and effective administration. Alongside our domestic efforts in that area, Australia engages in international fora. And in some of these, we work alongside South Africa. These include the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group and the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. It's been a real honour to join you tonight to gain an insight into how South Africa is similarly defending its own democratic ideals. We have shared interests in each other's success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The closing remarks will be done by Professor Gregory Davids, University of the Western Cape, who is also a partner in this event. So, Professor Davids.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I think my task is the most easiest of everybody. My brief is basically just to pass some concluding remarks on events that have started already this afternoon at UWC and then culminated this evening. And then just to give a vote of thanks to all the participants. So that's my brief for this evening. And I know everybody wants to get home, so I'll try to go as quick as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, the renditions by the esteemed guest speakers to me generate a mix of thought. It was thought-provoking, forward-thinking, but most importantly, what comes to mind for me was how did we land here? The presentations give us a snapshot of a current reality, such as loyalty to political party, instead of loyalty to the Constitution, that could derail the ideals and principles of a constitutional democracy. But simultaneously, speakers also provide us with future direction on how to overcome and give effect to the Constitution. One solution that stood out for me is the importance of civil society and citizens. The choice is either to become passive bystanders or active citizens having a collective responsibility to ensure the protection and implementation of the constitutional democracy to the common good of all of us. A positive, though, that stood out for me is that none of the speakers indicated to us that we have a dysfunctional democracy that suppressed the voice of the people. Instead, what I could hear from the speakers that the power still rests with the people, but the power is not being used effectively. An aspect, former President, that I think that is going to be quite critical in our future constitutional democracy is the possibility of coalition government, which we have not touched on this evening. And hopefully IFAA will focus on what does coalition government means, taking the lessons from what we see at local government. This afternoon, the Institute of African Alternative launched a partnership with UWC, Institute of Social Development. It is befitting that UWC, with its rich history of being at the forefront of a liberation struggle against apartheid, once again being called on to partner to drive the new agenda of African Alternative for Development. UWC as an institution of higher learning has a responsibility to partner with institutions such as IFAA, to do the research providing answers to the complex societal challenges confronting us. More importantly, we must produce graduates that understands and embodies the spirit of Ubuntu, understanding the role in a constitutional democracy to address the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, inequality, and creating a better life for all of us as envisioned in the Constitution. Lastly, it is my privilege to give a word of appreciation to the guest speakers and all of those that made this afternoon and evening event possible. The Chief Justice Zondo, for your insightful presentation and your contributions to protect our Constitution. Chief Justice, as ordinary citizens, we don't always have the opportunity to thank you. And I want to use this opportunity to thank you on behalf of millions of citizens on the work that you're doing. It's highly appreciated. Former President Honorable Motlanthe, your entire life, as the MCF indicated in the beginning, you unselfishly spent with a singular purpose to improve the lives of others, in particular the poor and marginalized. And as ordinary person, as well as when you were the president of the country, Today, you have spent the entire day giving your support. You've started this afternoon at UWC, and you're still present with us. As usual, leading from the front in this important initiative. We salute you, former President. Ms. Tessa Dooms, the Director of Programs of the Rivonius Circle, for your insightful, passionate contribution this evening on the role of civil society in making Parliament work. We want you to continue with this work. It's important that civil society play a rightful and meaningful role in our constitutional democracy. Ms. Mohammed, for chairing this event and ensuring a successful event. The main funders, the Australian High Commission in South Africa, represented by Justine Jones, Acting Deputy High Commissioner, and Will Butler, Senior Researcher, Policy Officer at the Australian High Commission. We thank you. The Rosa Luxemburg Foundation for their ongoing support for the Institute for African Alternatives, including for the Decode Project. We thank you. The Catholic Parliamentary Liaison Officer and Civic Academic for the contribution to the Decode Project, and all of those that participated in the workshops. And I'm sure many are here in attendance this evening. The District 6 Homecoming Center that welcome and host the event. Thank you very much. As we entered this evening, we already felt as we're coming home. To UWC, who has provided IFAA and his journal New Agenda with an academic home. Special thanks to Professor Amina Bayat, the Director of the Institute of Social Development, that made this partnership possible. Thanks to the colleagues from UWC, Umes Bawa, Lance Snyders, and others. And lastly, thank you for IFA colleagues for hosting this important event. A special word of thanks to you, the audience, for joining us this evening. And once again, a safe journey home. I thank you. Thank you.